Ready, play.
Well, hello and welcome. Today we are joined by a true legend of the game, a Hall of Famer, a 21-time Grand Slam doubles champion, and one half of arguably the greatest women's doubles team in the history of the sport. Pam also reached the U.S. Open singles final at the age of just 16, went on to have an incredible career both on and off the court and behind the mic now. And today she's a very powerful voice for athlete protection and player advocacy. So it's an honor to welcome Pam Shriver. Pam, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you.
Hey Brandon, thanks for having me. It's kind of a fun. I'm in Los Angeles where I've lived for about 25 years, but I was originally from the Baltimore, Washington area. That's where I made my pro debut in January of '78, and to have seen the Washington D.C. tournament conclude in such a dramatic fashion last night was quite spectacular, and it was weird watching it with my family here in LA and Darren Cahill, who was over for a barbecue, and to watch my home area put on such a great show despite some tough weather was really fun. But anyway, should we get talking about the women's side of DC, because that was pretty memorable as well.
Totally, totally. And it brought up some, I guess, familiar faces when we saw Leylah Fernandez and Emma Raducanu on either side of the draw, and we're thinking, are we going to get a 2021 U.S. Open rematch? We did not, but Leylah Fernandez ends up taking the title in Washington. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was really impressed. I happened to be able to watch all or most of her matches during the week. It just happened to be at times where I saw her struggles physically when she beat Taylor Townsend in the middle of the week. I didn't see actually her beat Pegula, but that kind of started everyone to be on the lookout that Leylah was going to bring her hard court game and her tough lefty punch. The thing with Fernandez is when she has her serve together, she really can be a force, but the serve really has ups and downs within a match, but also within her year. And the serve worked beautifully. And obviously her win over Rybakina was unbelievable. The comeback late in the third after the first two sets, both were split tie breaks. That was one of the most memorable tour matches so far of the year. And then obviously was just too much for Kalinskaya in the finals. But I think what it showed was a little bit of that mental toughness that brought Leylah Fernandez to that US Open final, because when we reflect, it was Raducanu who had all straight set wins, but it was Leylah Fernandez who had such a tough draw and won match after match after match, tough three setters. So nobody questions Fernandez's competitive spirit, her mindset, but physically it's been hard for her to stay healthy. And then again, the serve can kind of come and go. But wow, let's see. Tough, tough. She's got to play, I think, later today in her home country. So let's hope she doesn't push it too much and she stays healthy.
Right. And that was something I was thinking about throughout the week. You talk about how tough those conditions were in Washington, D.C. this week with the heat and whatnot. Having to go, battle after battle is really, really impressive and shows kind of that competitive and fighting spirit that Fernandez possesses. It's definitely great to see it back here. Any thoughts on Emma Raducanu coming out of this
Y-
tournament?
Yeah, I feel like since Miami, really, Emma's been trending in a pretty good way. When you think about Emma's age, what is she, 22? She was 18 when she had that historic run to the US Open title out of qualifying. This should be sort of her normal trajectory. But there's this
Yeah.
huge asterisk, which she accomplished something that may never be accomplished again and had never been accomplished, which is a qualifier coming out and winning a major. I know it's happened in golf, but it's really different. And now here she is at 22 years old, kind of step by step, getting better in her game, figuring out how to talk about somebody who needs to figure out how to stay healthy. It's Raducanu. I know a lot of people question all the turnover in her coaching team, but as long as, she's healthy and clear in her head how she wants to construct points, she can lean on a lot of different voices and seems to be able to do pretty well. And let's hope, I mean, women's tennis would be so much better if Andrescu if Raducanu, if Osaka, and those are all past US Open winners. Osaka, obviously, a couple of Australians as well. But we need these past major winners that should still be in their prime to be able to be a part of the conversation. And then can you imagine what we would have on the women's side? So that's my hope for women's tennis, is that does happen.
Totally. And I think you bring up a good point in terms of obviously health, but being a past champion, having that understanding and experience, and also, yeah, being in her prime. What sort of expectations do you have with Raducanu? Can she win another slam?
Well, listen, if you can come out of qualifying and win 10 straight matches in straight sets, I'm not going to say she can't do it again. Obviously, what she in the last, say, 3.5 years, 4 years, she's kind of fallen back into kind of like a solid player with some good results during the year. But if you just took her resume, take that US Open out, that one tournament out, you would probably say no. She's not going to win one. She might have some quarterfinals, semifinals, but when you know that somebody's had the mindset to do it once, you always think, sure, they can do it again.
Yeah. And on the flip side, I want to ask you about kind of being on the other side of that, the losing end. And that was Anna Kalinskaya yesterday. She lost to Fernandez in the final. She was in a final earlier this year in Dubai, where she lost to Paulini. Can you just talk a little bit about the kind of maybe the mental aspect? And we obviously saw it with Fokina, Davidovich Fokina last night. That was his third final this year. He's come up short, and he's been to four in his career. So he's come up short every time. So can you just talk a little bit about, losing in a final, how it weighs on you mentally? Can it be a problem?
Oh, yeah. Whenever I see someone lose championship points, and it was interesting watching with Darren Cahill last night, as we saw Davidovich Fokina unable to win the match points. And while it was still going on, or maybe it was just after it over, Darren reflected what it felt like to be in the coaching box during Roland Garros when Sinner had 3 championship points to win a major and didn't close it out, and the devastation that the whole team felt. Obviously, a tour level tournament, you could see from Alejandra's experience how painful it was, especially on the heels of a few months ago. He had the same situation, very similar, in Delray Beach, had championship points. There was a let cord that the eventual winner would hit. I think it was Kecmanovic.
Sure.
That was, it was just a fraction. I mean, he's literally come within a half inch of winning 2 titles this year. Split that half inch in 2, apply the half inch to his benefit, and he's got 2 titles. That's tennis. So it's the mindset, and you could see the 2 players with the best mindset on the weekend was Alex de Minaur and Leylah Fernandez. Now there were 2 very different finals. One was like went down to the last point, and the other one was kind of an easy win. And Kalinskaya's point was, well, why didn't she bring the same form to a final? Sometimes you're physically just you're worn out, but a lot of times it is the mindset, and this is the gold of tennis. And we've seen it with Sinner. Like he just showed us in tennis probably the greatest mindset reset ever, which is coming out of Roland Garros devastation and then winning Wimbledon. And I think all tennis players, and this is something I tried to work with Donna Vekic on for 2.5 years when I was on her team, is how to improve the mental side, how to develop the skills so that you can be the most resilient, strongest between the ears out there, because generally that player will be the winner.
Right. And Pam, something that comes to mind in terms of, you have your team, you have your coach. At what point and how important is it to have, maybe a therapy or someone who can help with mental health in your team? Does that go hand in hand with coaching, or your thoughts?
It did, certainly. I know Darren I think a lot of what Darren leans into it as a coach is the mindset piece. And I think some coaches can bring that to the table.
Mhm.
I could to a certain extent, but I couldn't go full time with Donna. And I felt like, so we had a partner on the mindset time on the team for about a year, actually, when she had her best results. I think it's a really, really important part of every tennis player's team should be, whether it's virtual most of the time or whether it's split. Madison Keys is the best example, right? Where she shared with all of us after she won Melbourne, after all those years of trying, and kind of she knew her mindset, let her down a bit. Um, and she leaned into both therapy, and it's two different things. We got to remember
Hmm.
therapy is very different from the performance mindset work that's really centered around what you do on the court. Um, but Madison kind of showed us that it's both. It's both. And getting things in the proper place in your life can often free you up to play your best tennis and not be afraid. One of the most important things is to not be afraid of losing. You have to just control what you can control, work hard, know the tactics, do your best effort, and let the chips fall. And if you don't win, the other person was too good. But if you have that attitude, it frees you up. Once you're afraid of losing and you feel that anxiety, you can't be at your best.
Yeah. No, totally, totally. And thank you for that answer and kind of the insights between obviously like a mental coach as opposed to, therapy on the outside. I think it's important. Another player I want to talk about is Elena Rybakina. Obviously been at the top of the game for a few years now. It's been maybe a little bit of a quiet 2025, although she has picked up um, a title. Can you talk a little bit about, where she stands, where her game's at, and what kind of these next 3 to 4 weeks look like for her?
Well, first off, her game is has so many tools. I mean, look, she won one Wimbledon. She almost won an Australian Open. One of the best major finals of the last decade was when she lost to Sabalenka in Melbourne a couple of years, 2.5 years ago. With her serve, we saw what Serena Williams did with the greatest female serve of all time, and I think Rybakina has the current best serve in women's tennis. It's not to Serena's level because you have to hit that great serve time and time again in pressure situations to win multiple majors. I think there's too much going on off court that's not settled. And this goes back to the mindset. I don't believe Rybakina can be in that winning mindset consistently with all the storm that's been around her off court. Once that settles down, um, I think the sky's the limit, but I do have a big concern whether or not there's too much scarring that's gone on, given everything around her coaching situation. Um, so it's a tough one to know. And I feel for her. I always want the best for women players, and I want them to have, the best, most positive teams around them. Obviously, we know coaches can coach in many different ways, but there is a limit to what can be said. And sometimes I think it's been a difficult thing for a lot of us, I think, to see in women's tennis, but hoping for the best for her.
For sure, for sure. One more player I want to touch on is Jessica Pegula. Comes into Washington as the one seed. Does lose early, but I want to look at kind of her year as a whole and kind of the point of career she's at. Right, 31 years old, three titles this year. It was Austin, Charleston, and Bad Homburg, and where she defeated Iga, but then goes out to lose early in Wimbledon. Can you talk a little about kind of where her career is at?
Yeah, well, I think Pagula, obviously, when you think about 12 months ago, she had that big noose hanging around her neck, which she'd never been able to win a quarterfinal at a major. And then when she's finally be able to beat Iga Swiatek last year at the U.S. Open, and then go one better with that great comeback over Muhova. That was a really important time because Pagula, well, careers are extended at a high level well into the 30s now. Um, in Pagula's in her early 30s, it was time. She needed to have that kind of breakthrough. So I think she's still going to be one of the favorites at the U.S. Open. I was on court two at Wimbledon after she had won Bad Homburg, right? And that's been, as we saw from Iga this year, getting to the finals of Bad Homburg, and Donna got to the finals the year before and came within
Mhm.
2 points of a Wimbledon final. Pegula seemed to be set up to have a great Wimbledon, then just fell flat on court two. Played a terrible first round match, went out early, but sometimes going out early at Wimbledon, getting that, all of a sudden you get extra 2 weeks back to have like a mid-season pause, reset, and then training block for the hard courts. And Pegula's loved Canada so through the years. So I think Pegula, look out for Pegula these next three big tournaments. Canada, Cincinnati, and of course the last major of the year, the Open, where she's defending finalist.
Yeah, and let's turn our attention there. Let's talk about, well, top players, not taking part in Toronto. Sabalenka is missing out. Or sorry, they didn't take place in Washington, but also won't be playing in Toronto, Sabalenka. But Iga also doesn't play in Washington. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that decision and kind of where their mindset is ahead of the U.S. Open?
Well, we were just talking about like how Pegula, by losing first round of Wimbledon, which was not her plan, I'm sure she's really upset. It ended up, it's going to be a gift for her to be ready to go in Toronto. But for people like Iga who played in the finals, it's not, it's a pretty short turnaround. The
Mhm.
US hard court season, when Wimbledon moved a week later, and then US Open middle weekend of the main draw is anchored for Labor Day, it doesn't give you a lot of time. And it's even more um oh, stressful when it's an Olympic year. At least this year it's not. But Canada is going to be the one with this new format, these new extended Masters and WTA 1000s taking on the same type format as Indian Wells than Miami. It's really going to hurt Canada, and I hope the pendulum has swung too far towards these joint events that take up 2 weeks. I don't think it's good for the players. There's too many players that just have no place to play for 10, 12 days. And then, okay, sure. Can you pick up like a Phoenix Challenger the second week of Indian Wells, or pick up Newport if you lose early at Wimbledon? Sure. But it's like not ideal. And I think that players and regular tournaments need to speak up against the power that these Master Series 1000s have taken. And I like the fact that Mark Ein has shown what a great 1 week joint 500 event can do, in the old school way of just being over 7 or 8 days.
Totally, and thank you for those words. The sport is continuing to experiment a little bit with change, and these schedules are taxing on the players, and it's interesting to kind of hear different players speak up and their perspectives on it.
I
But
just want
Pam,
to bring in one
yeah,
more thing, Brennan, on
please
Brenner,
do.
on when you think about the prize money, like I was watching a PGA Tour event that finished in Minnesota on the weekend, and it was a 4-day event. And look at the prize money that the winner gets on a 4-day event, even on the LPGA Tour, and then on these Master Series that are taking up 2 weeks. I don't think the pay is what it should be either for the players. And this is part of the whole politics off court. So, the prize money isn't what it should be if they're going to take up 2 weeks of the calendar.
So another really important point that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about either. So thanks for bringing that up. So Pam, I want to finish off talking U.S. Open. Who is your favorite? We can go both men's and women's, but we'll start with the women's.
All right, I want to get up the rankings.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I mean, I think on US Open, I think I'm going to go in with three co-favorites. I'm going to go in with, on the women's side, Swiatek, Sabalenka, and Coco Gauff. They've all won it before. Um, I guess the one that I'm most concerned about now is the mindset of Sabalenka, given all the tough losses she's had this year in majors. Um, but she's the defending champ, and was still overall in the 12 months, when you look who's been the most consistent, who's been able to get to the most semis and finals, it's pretty much Sabalenka. But I feel like Swiatek found gold by unable to win at Roland Garros, figuring out her grass court game as she obviously won Wimbledon juniors, but as a great champion in our sport, she figured out grass courts. And I felt like her mindset, something shifted between losing at Roland Garros and arriving at Wimbledon, she was lighter, more fun, more focused. Obviously, got her shots more compact for the grass. And I think Iga's going to be a force at this year's US Open. And I always have trust in Coco Gauff, three areas of Coco Gauff. I always have trust in the backhand. I have trust she's one of the greatest movers of all time. And also I have a lot of trust now that her mindset is going to be ready to fight, battle, even if she doesn't have her A game. So one of those three, and then you've got probably four or five like Rybakina and Pegula, those types that are just behind.
No, I totally agree. And I think the Coco Gauff is a fun one to break down because you make a good point. Coco is one of those fighters, mentally never gives up and physically just such an amazing athlete and can find her way to pick up wins even when she's not playing her best tennis, and that's a extremely important trait in this sport.
Yeah, and
Uh,
also Coco Gauff is also a great leader, both on the court and off
mhm.
the court. And I really admire, she's the same age as my oldest child, 21. And I really admire how she takes on the past pioneering spirit and the spirit of speaking up, um, advocating. And I'm in such admiration of Coco on and off the court. And let me just quickly on the men's side, it's unbelievable what men's tennis has found here in the Sinner Alcaraz dominant era right after the big three. And I think the big question the field has to ask is who can step up on a hard court and challenge Yannick Sinner? Because and when you think about Sinner's year, what a gift in a weird way his suspension was in that he could really recover from an unbelievable rise to number one with all those majors and be able to go into the French, Wimbledon, and now the US series, the hard court series going into the US Open, much fresher than anyone else on the men's side.
Totally. I agree with you there. I think he's the one to beat, especially on a hard court. Pam, I do want to give you an opportunity to give a quick word on the association that you're working with.
Yeah, most people from the tennis world know I live in the Los Angeles area. I live Palisades adjacent, and January 7th was a devastating day for the city of Los Angeles. The Palisades and Eaton fire swept through two beautiful villages, Pacific Palisades and Altadena, and greatly impacted negatively were tennis complexes, both at parks. In the case of Altadena, there's a private club totally destroyed. And so through Village Rising, an organization that I helped found back in 2018 after the devastating Woolsey fire swept through Los Angeles and Malibu to the ocean. And we're raising money, raising awareness for the needs to build back tennis in both communities. And I'm partnering with a lot of different organizations. And, if anyone wants to look on Village Rising, the website, if you can give a little gift towards the build back of tennis. We're on the ground, we're nimble, we're a small organization, nobody takes a salary. And we're just trying to help people in need who've been devastated. And I think one way you can do it is get activities like the sport of tennis back to these families and these kids that have been just had a really rough 2025.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Pam, and we'll definitely be sure to highlight that. But overall, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Your insights and stories and honesty are incredibly appreciated. Obviously, as a legend of the game and someone who is still shaping its future. So, just want to say thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure having you on.
Well, thanks. And thanks for honoring my half-hour limit because I got to go about a busy Monday.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.